Hi everybody, welcome back to Moviola. Today we're going to go over everything you need to know about text. Now, what you need to know first off is text is a very special type of layer within After Effects. It's not a footage or a picture or a shape layer. It kind of acts slightly differently. There's some added controls that you have with it where you can, really play with the text in a lot of different ways. Now, to begin, we have to examine what is included within the text layer. So, let's take an example, like this text right here. There's a special panel right over here called the character panel that controls pretty much, everything within this layer. So, up here you can change the font. You can change the type of font, like bold or italics or thin, if that font has it. You can change the fill color to anything you'd like, and the stroke color or the outline color. You can change the font size right here if you want it bigger or smaller. You can change the leading, which is the space between two lines. So just in case if you need space, a lot of space between two lines. You can change the kerning and the tracking. A lot of people get these two confused. It's pretty simple. Kerning is just the individual spacing between two characters. So this is for finer adjustments, as opposed to tracking that will adjust everything uniformly. So with kerning, you can kind of really dial in the specific spacing between two different characters. Over here we can change the stroke width and how the stroke width actually interacts with the text. Right now we have all the fills over all the strokes, just so that we can read the text. Here we have the scale. We can vertically scale, and you can see that the anchor point of text usually is in the center of every letter, right at the bottom right here. And then we can do it sideways as well. Yep. Over here we have the faux styles, so we can, if we just need that extra bolding, or if your font doesn't come with any special variants, you can click all this on. Now that might seem very basic, but it's important to kind of go over this just so that we are sharing the same vocabulary, because it's going to be important as we go on. Now, you're in After Effects, so you want to animate these texts. Well, one of the very special things about text layers is that you can do that straight within the layer. Let's see what it comes in with first. Now with these path options, what you can do is, let's take the pen tool, draw just kind of an empty mask path on the text layer and choose that mask. Now we can see the text is going along this path, and of course the path is animatable or keyframeable, as well as how the text is interacting with the path. So we can have it perpendicular or just straight on. We can reverse it. We can move it along by changing this first margin or last margin, or even force the alignment so that it goes along the entire path evenly. Now under more options here, let's get rid of this mask. Under more options, this is where you can see where the anchor points initially are. You can obviously change that somewhere here, or just back to 0, back to default. You can change the inter-character blending, which really is important only if your letters overlap and you want some cool effect. Like here you can see the overlap, or the inter-character blending is different so that it's subtracting where they overlap. But you know, you can just have it normal if you want. All good. Now, you might notice there's a special thing up here called animate. If we click the arrow, you'll see a bunch of these transform options, as well as, you know, other properties that text have, like fill color, tracking, line spacing. All these things are animatable. So let's choose opacity just to really give you an example of how this works. With animators, you have two different options, or different properties that they give you. One's the range selector, and one's the property that we selected, which is opacity. Let's bring opacity down to, let's say, 10%, just so that you can kind of see what's going on here. Now, you have these two borders, and that's your range, also depicted here. So anything that's within your range becomes 10%. So if we shift the end here, you can see anything that's outside of the range, this range, goes back to default 100%. Same thing with the starting position. So what we can do is we can add a keyframe at the start, keyframe at the end, and let's just go straight to 0 opacity. There you go. Now the text animates on. We can even displace it where we keyframe the end so that first it disappears, then it reappears. See, everything within the bounds of that range is opacity 0. There are a couple advanced options for this. First, you can offset the range if you ever need to. That's an added control. Under advanced options, you can have this range selector by index rather than percentage, which means instead of going 0 to 100%, it will go from 0 to whatever your max, just a number basically, and it'll be basically whatever your max is. There's 15 characters here, including the space, so that's why this max is 15. You can also change the units based on characters or words. So this will go real fast because it's still at 15, but if we change it to 2, because there's 2 words here, then it'll work the same, but the words will disappear together. Let's change that back to characters. Back to 15. Great. Now, you can also change the mode as to which it's the range is interacting with the property. Right now it's on add, and that's the default. If we do subtract, it'll pretty much do the opposite, where everything within the range is the default opacity, which is 100%, and everything outside of that range is what you have set here. Now, there's a bunch more here. Don't really have time to talk about all of them, but play around with them. All of these do like slight nudges towards the thing that you want to do. And just an example of like, kind of all the different things. This is a scale and opacity. This is a roll, or a position and rotation, and this is a position and rotation again. One thing I forgot to mention, just so that you know that it's there. There's a randomized order that you can turn on or off that will pretty much do what it says, randomize the order of things getting on and off. And that's the basics of animation within the text layer. Next, let's go to expressions. All right, so here we have a pretty common situation where we've created kind of a title card, and our supervisor comes in and maybe they don't like the font of these titles. So what do? We can just select all the different titles here in the timeline. There we go. And change the font here. And then we can change the font size, but unfortunately it's not uniform across all these things, so then we have to do it individually, and it ends up kind of being a mess, and it's a little time consuming and finicky to do that. So there's got to be a better way, right? Luckily for you, there is, and it's in the form of expressions. Now, what we're going to do is we're basically going to write an expression that ties the style of these text layers to these text layers. So we're going to use these first ones, the direction and Sperry Boatson, as the drivers for the rest of the card. How do we do that? Well, underneath the text properties, in addition to the path options and more options, we have this source text. This source text is where we're going to write some expressions to drive what's being shown in this text layer. So, just a real quick demonstration. There's two things that this source text will control. One is what the text will actually say. So if you put something in quotes, like this, it'll end up here with all the the styling that you already put. Now this is helpful, especially when a nice little kind of shortcut is if you parent this to any kind of property or written expression, it will return what it's returning to that particular property. So if you parent the source text to, let's say, rotation, and we rotate it, not only will the source text rotate, it will tell you how much it's rotating. So right here it's 335 plus 360, so that's 695. So that's just a handy little tool that you can use it for when you're trying to troubleshoot some expressions that you're trying to write up or trying to create. However, what we're going to do is we're actually going to drive the style and this is how you do it. So from here, and let's open up this source text too. We're going to create a variable, call it the title main. Let's move that out of the way. Then we'll pick whip this source text and then add to it .style. So let's see what that gives us for now. It will give us that. Oh, I'm dumb. There we go. But you'll notice there's it's copying everything from this style. So what we don't want is the font size, because the font size is different between the direction and everything else. So how do we fix that? Well, what I did to create this, I proportionally sized all my fonts so that these two were 75% as big as these. So we're gonna amend that by adding something to this title main. I'm gonna put .set font, and if you don't like typing, we can also add it in this expression, like drop down menu, properties, and it has all the different types of properties that you can adjust with or drive with expressions. That's why it was important to kind of go over these things, because that's pretty much the same things that you're controlling here. So we want to look for set font size, and the value will be, we're going to refer back to this title main right here, font size. So we're singling out the font size of direction, and then we're going to multiply that by 0.75, and that's going to give you this thing here. Now let's do the same thing with all these names. Well, we're going to do it with one first. We'll do it with Helder von Bales. And we can just copy and paste that expression. But if we do, obviously, it's going to go here. So we're going to change this. Let's change this variable to name. Change it to right here, Sperry Boatson. Yep. That's right. And then great. There we go. Same thing happens. And now what we can do is copy this expression, copy expression only, choose all the names, and then paste. And now when we go to Sperry Boatson and change the font, it will automatically change everything. It'll automatically change the font size relative to this one. So if we do 80, all these will be 60, I believe, because that's 3/4 of 80. And same thing with direction. Yeah, let's do it real. Where is it? Let's do that real quick. Doop. And changing this will change all the other ones very simply. Now, this is saving you a little bit of time, but the very cool thing is these are ugly. Let's let's go back to the other ones. The very cool thing is we can carry these expressions over across compositions. So even this one, not formatted at all. What we can do is very easily take these source texts and hook them up to these source texts. I wanted this one. There we go. It's as easy as pick whipping the source text and adding over here just dot style. Boom. One more time. Pick whipping Sperry Boatson, put dot style. There we go. And now any changes that you make here will automatically transfer over here. I like this one. This one's good. Easy peasy. And if you plan out to do this across multiple compositions, multiple like title sequences and all that, it's just two clicks instead of 20, and it saves you so much time. Now let's take a look at one more thing that I want to show you that you can do with text, and this requires a little bit of a spreadsheet knowledge. So let's look at that now. For the final tip, we're going to be working with a type of file called a CSV file. CSV means comma separated values, and it's basically a type of file that you can get from spreadsheets and Excel sheets. So here's a quick one that I created in Excel, I created it in Google Sheets, and it's just lyrics to a very famous song. And then I translated into Spanish and French and put it within this table. Now we're going to use this table to drive these subtitles. How do we do that? Well, After Effects supports CSVs, so we can bring it into our timeline as a layer. Obviously, it's not going to be seen at all. It's just there to kind of drive data. And if we go here, we'll see that this CSV has the English, Spanish, and French. So all we're going to do is we're just going to copy this expression, paste it into this source text, and see what we get. If you'll notice, this data value of 0, 0 is going to reference, let's go back to the table, this line right here. After Effects will ignore this top line and just use this top line as the label for this data. So you'll see English, Spanish, and French. English, Spanish, and French. And then it starts its coordinate system as 0, 0. So this is 0, 0. This is column 1, row 0. So if we change this data to 1, 0, this first number being the column, this second number being the row, it changes to Spanish. That's pretty cool, right? So what we can do now is we can set up an expression to drive the keyframes to create subtitles for, let's say, a music video, or subtitles for a show or whatever, and then fill in this document to create, this Spanish subtitles, the French subtitles, if you can do German, blah, 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 blah. All right? So let's see how this works. We already have this data in here. Now we have to create a couple of variables to fill in here so that we can keyframe this source text. So let's create one, let's call it K for keyframes. Oh, you know what we have to do first? We have to add expression controls. So let's add 2 sliders, one for keyframes, and then second one for language. Now we can add the variables. K for keyframes. Now what we'll do is pick whip up to this keyframe slider, and then L for languages. Then now all we do is we put L in the column section, because L is going to be driving which column this is referencing, and this second is going to be keyframe, which is going to be referencing the row. So we'll put K there. Great. Now we can see keyframe is 0, language is 0. If we put language to 1, then it's Spanish. If we put language to 2, then it's French. If we put the slider to 15, 14, 12. Okay. So, pretty cool, right? There is a problem being, here we go, being comma separated values. Here, let's actually look at what it looks like. This is what it looks like in the spreadsheet, but if we look at it as it really is as a text form, it's comma separated values, right? So the values are separated by commas. See right here? These commas separate the different columns. Now, within the lyrics, you'll see here, this should be a comma, but we had to replace all the commas within the text with semicolons. Where is it? See, semicolon, wherever there's supposed to be a comma. So, luckily for us, there's an expression to deal with this called replace. Now, replace is a little funky. Just follow along, and then you can kind of like use this to your advantage and however you need to use it. So what we're going to do is we're going to do replace, and within the parentheses, we can do forward slash semicolon forward slash, and that's what we're replacing. We're telling the expression to look for semicolons, but if we leave it like that, it's only going to find the first semicolon. So we're going to add GI, which is going to tell After Effects to look globally for semicolons, then replace it with, in quotation marks, double quotation marks, comma. Let's get rid of that. From there, now you see the semicolon is now replaced with commas. Just a little, run around that you have to do when you're dealing with comma separated values, just because that's how it's going to be read. And now we can add some keyframes, as the song's going, add a keyframe whenever this lyric goes forward. And then if you want to switch it to a different language, you can add more to the CSV. You can another place you can use it in is something like this main card, where you're hooking up the names to certain cells within the spreadsheet, and then all you have to do is change the spreadsheet, save it, and it'll change it within here. Pretty cool. All right, folks, that's it for today. I hope you guys learned a little something, and make sure to check out the rest of Moviola to find more learning videos. My name's Tom.